Scott Anderson, the Director of Affairs for the UN Relief and Works Agency in Gaza, who is in Nusrat today. I want to start with that strike that Clarissa filed her report on. Israel defending this strike, as of course it often does, saying it was a base for Hamas and other militants. What is your understanding from the perspective where you are, of course?
Our understanding is, and unfortunately we can't verify it because we haven't been in North Gaza since October, but our understanding is that over 100 people were killed or injured in a strike. And I think what this highlights is that really nowhere is safe in Gaza, and we need all parties to the conflict to respect the sanctity of places where people are seeking safety. Those could include schools, but they also include healthcare facilities and hospitals. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see things like this happen where innocent civilians will die, and that's something we're all working very hard to try and prevent.
And as we anticipate the potential, at least, for ceasefire and hostage talks this week, as Clarissa reported, this strike happening just a day after the US agreed to release $3.5 billion in military aid to Israel. CNN analysis confirmed that this was a US-made bomb in this attack. Do you have any hope that strikes like what we say this week, that we've seen this weekend, will stop if the US continues to provide this kind of support? Certainly, there are calls, from around the region for the US to further use its leverage with Israel, and part of that, a major part of that would, of course, be that military aid.
I think that we're 10 months into the conflict now. Everyone in Gaza is traumatized. They're scared. There's nowhere safe for them and their family. And what's desperately needed more than anything right now is a ceasefire that returns the hostages to Israel that have been gone from their families for 10 months, but also a ceasefire that gives respite for the people here in Gaza and a chance for them to begin rebuilding their lives and rebuilding their homes. That's the only thing that's going to prevent future occurrences like this is a ceasefire. That's something that's been called for by many. We continue to call for it, and we hope that it will come very soon.
Well, negotiations are expected to be back on this week. Who is at the table, as it were, or in either Doha and Egypt, still to be confirmed. But I just want to remind our viewers of the framework that was put forward in July by Joe Biden. Some people referring to this as a bridging sort of deal, as it were. It begins with a 6-week pause in the fighting and the withdrawal of IDF troops from Gaza. Stage 2 would see Palestinian prisoners exchanged for the remaining hostages, and the last phase would see, the potential for reconstruction of Gaza. Look, I know you're not a party to these talks, but as an agency, do you believe that the parties can reach a deal at this stage?
I very much hope so. As I said, that's what's most desperately needed here in Gaza now is a ceasefire. I think it's very important that they are going to begin speaking. No, obviously, agreement can be reached if talks aren't being held. And from our perspective, we see the situation on the ground getting much worse. Polio has been detected, hepatitis A. We've seen a lot of skin disease in people. There's mountains of garbage that needs picked up. And for us to begin addressing any of those challenges, we need a ceasefire to be in place. We can bring aid in at scale so people can start returning to their homes, so the hostages can go back to their families, and we can begin what's going to be a very long task of rebuilding Gaza. So I think you need a certain level of optimism to work here. So I'm optimistic that a ceasefire deal will soon be reached. And we very much hope that the parties can find common ground in their negotiations.
You're in Nusrat. What's the situation where you are?
It's pretty bad for everybody. I look out my window and I can see tents, I can see makeshift plastic structures, and I can see what's a very difficult life for people. It's very hot right now. There's not enough clean drinking water for everyone. You should have access to 15 liters of drinking water a day. Most people only have 2 to 3. And all that just exacerbates what's a very difficult situation for them. Every day people wake up and they're just trying to meet their basic necessities of finding food, finding water, finding a way to get cool in what's, a very, very hot climate. And that's repeated day after day after day. And I see people out, as I said, outside the window of the guest house where I sleep. It's very difficult for them. We do worry often about an outbreak of disease. And I mentioned the polio and hepatitis A. And if we don't find, hopefully, a ceasefire very soon is reached, the conditions are going to get worse. Summer will end, we'll move into winter, and that will bring a whole different challenge for everyone as they're then trying to keep warm rather than trying to keep cool. And as I said, the only way this ends is with the ceasefire deal that returns the hostages to their families and that allows people in Gaza to go home, to begin rebuilding their homes and to begin rebuilding their lives.
It's good to have you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. The perspective from on the ground in Gaza.